Ahoy, and welcome back to Titanic Talkline. I am Alexia, and this week I am joined by Sean from the Men Who Love Movies podcast. Hi, Sean. I'm waving, which is
Hey,
great for a podcast.
yeah, thanks for having me. It's men who like movies.
Sorry, I
No, you're all good. You're all good. It's
love was on my
honestly
mind.
no, that's okay. So, like sometimes you love a man, sometimes you don't. It's all good. Sometimes we just like him.
Sometimes we just like, as someone who also does like men, I understand that concept. Sometimes we don't always love them. Sometimes they are
No.
merely likable.
Yep. Say yeah. It's sometimes it's you have to make that the like, and sometimes it's even less.
Listen, there's a distinction, and there is a distinction.
You're not even wrong. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. I am excited to have you on because you not only are a big fan of the movie, you also have some interest in the ship itself and sort of the I think the way you were describing it is like the social ramifications of such.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Neat.
So when I was a kid, I was a huge shipwreck fan. Like Titanic was. So I was. This will age me, but I was 6 when the movie came out. So my parents bought it on VHS in probably like '99 when I saw was when I first saw it, and I remember seeing it and just being like addicted to shipwrecks. So as a kid, and like not to toot my own horn, but I was, like former gifted kid, where I have like I was reading at a college level by the time I was in like four kind of thing. Whatever. Doesn't
Hmm.
matter anything. But like I was had a huge interest in shipwrecks because I was reading one of my mom's like Reader's Digest books, and it was
Nice.
about the Andrea Doria. It was like a story
Oh,
about the
cool.
Andrea Doria, and it was really cool, and it ended up getting me involved. And then Titanic came out, and I was like, "Oh, we're totally watching this. There's a ship sinking." And I remember watching the whole thing, and I was like, "Well, that was really long, but it was really cool."
It is
But
long,
it,
but it is cool.
yeah, so it got me really interested in it, and I remember I found a, I don't know, did you ever have Scholastic book fairs when
We
you're in?
did. I
Yeah.
went to a Catholic school, so I think they were a little bit smaller than some of the ones that happen at the public schools, just based on like photos I've seen. But we did have
Mhm.
it.
Oh yeah, so we had so I that were like my favorite days of school ever. But I bought a book that didn't really give me any new information, but it came with like a Titanic model actually sank.
Ooh.
Like it would break in
Hmm.
half and stuff. It was the coolest thing, and I wish I still had it. But yeah,
That sounds amazing.
yeah, it was so cool. But yeah, I've had a huge interest in it over the years, and I really like seeing like what happened afterwards, because
Right.
in the movie you get, like Rose has this really full life, and I love that for her, but like wanted to know a little bit more about what happened after,
Yeah.
which I think is really
Congratulations to Rose
cool.
and everything. But
Yeah, exactly. She becomes an actress, and you know acts
hooray.
her face off and does all the things they were talking about, and god, I'll cry though if I think about it too much because I love this movie.
I
But yeah,
understand.
I
I don't just like
one
this movie. I love this movie.
right, exactly. And there's so little that you can't love about it. Like I
Yeah.
can't think of very many things of like why I would think this movie is bad. And like I think a lot of
Sure.
people have problems with like the song mainly, like, and that's what makes them have some sort of negative connotation for the movie. But like
It
I just
was
love this movie.
profoundly overplayed at the time, and even
Oh
I can remember
gosh,
that
yes.
because I was only like eight when the movie came out, so I wasn't old. But
Hmm.
we would listen to when we were from the DC area, like 97.1, which was a like modern to kind of
WLT.
was like ours was 97.1 Wash FM. Yeah, I
Oh,
remember that jingle because it
nice.
was so pronounced. But yeah, I remember when the movie came out, that song would play on that channel a lot,
Oh, at least once an hour, at least.
at least.
Yeah,
And it was
oh, I'm
during a
sorry.
time when they didn't really do the like replaying as much as they do now, so it
Oh
definitely
yeah.
stood out.
Yes. And see, our 97 one was WLIT, and I don't remember the jingle, so that's
Nice.
probably made up. But yeah, ours did the same thing like every hour. And now when I hear it,
So
sometimes I
much.
just go, but it's like
Yeah.
a good and
No, I get
I
it.
but yeah, that was one of the things that I think people get. I think of Titanic in film at least is one of my favorite movie romances. But
Yeah.
yeah, I one of the things I did want to talk about is I do like one of the sorry I
I mean, I am
you ever
I
see
am putting
Bruce
myself on
Almighty
mute. Yes! Oh my
when he's
gosh! I
when he's
love
just like
that movie.
that's where I'm at with that.
God, Steve
But yeah,
Carell, so good.
oh, so good. Too bad Evan Almighty was not. But
Yeah, it's a
that's
little bit
neither here nor
disappointing.
there. I speak in
No.
fluent movie quotes, by the way. So if any pop up and you're like, I don't know what he's talking about, just ask. I promise I'll always answer.
Sweet.
At least the ones I can remember where they come from.
Fair enough.
But yeah, some of the ramifications I like to think about are like the changes to maritime law,
Hmm.
where like uh, there were so many things that changed after Titanic that I think are really fascinating. Like ship design changed a lot. Like
Hmm.
bulkheads were made even higher. Like they used to go up about 10 feet, and now they
Hmm.
go even higher than that to essentially curb this from ever happening again if they were to crash into anything.
Right.
I was going to say the International Convention for Safety of Life at Sea, or which is also known as SOLAS, which was a British American board of inquiry, required that there be enough lifeboats on board the ship for everyone with lifeboat drills.
Right.
And that was developed in 1914, but it wasn't fully adopted until 1974. And I
Wow.
think I just think that's cool. Yeah, so it took a long time, but I mean, I think it's a lot of it was still under practice. Um,
Sure.
and I mean, the Radio Act. One thing that I don't love about the movie itself is the
Hmm.
fact that it doesn't talk about the Californian, which I'm 90. Sorry, I forgot to write this one down, but I do remember there is a ship that was closer than the Carpathia. I'm pretty
It is the
positive it was the
Californian.
Californian, yeah. And
Yep. Yep.
the Californian couldn't have their radio off and was unable to come and help. And after that, the Radio Act of 1912 required all sea vehicles or sea vessels to have
Hmm.
a 24-hour radio system, and their operators had to be licensed. Which
Yeah.
I was just like, that's one thing I do wish they would have kept, because they do keep the fireworks going off, which was how they were
Hmm.
trying to show the Carpathia, like, hey, we need help. We're not just shooting off fireworks on a
Right.
random April.
I know
And
that in the Cameron film there is a deleted scene
mhm,
with the Californian and the wireless operator. I think his name is Cyril Evans. And this takes place before the sinking, back when um, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride on the Titanic were still trying to just like send out first class messages, and they just had like a fucking million of them. So they were like, "Oh my
mhm.
god, we gotta get all these messages." So the scene was basically like, yeah, exactly. So the scene was basically Phillips being like, "Dude, this guy from the California won't leave me alone. I'm gonna tell him to shut up. We're working Cape Brace." And then it clips over to the Californian where Cyril's like, "Can you believe it? Just trying to warn him about the ice. He tells me to shut up." And then it just shows him like taking his headset off and turning off his machine and like going to bed. But that was a
Yeah.
filmed scene and it didn't make it, which I kind of understand simply because with no other context, that scene paints them in a terrible light instead of
Hmm.
understanding. It's like he wasn't turning off his radio out of spite. He was turning off his radio because it's like his shift had ended. He was trying to just be like, "Hey man, last minute warning before I like go to bed
Right.
and want to let you know this thing." And instead of being like, "Hey man, thanks," he got basically, "Fuck off, you bastard." So he was like, "Okay, then I'm just good night to you too then."
Yeah.
So
Well, and
and
that's
I think without the context, it would have just made him look like an ass.
no, and you're absolutely right. And that's one thing is that you just there's no mention of it, which I think.
My dog has an opinion. Sorry, my mom's in town and I think she just came home. So,
No, it's all good. What's
hang
your
on
dog's
one
name?
second. His name is Lato. Mom, I'm doing an interview. You can let him out though. Don't know why I sent text
Leto, like
anymore.
Leto Atreides.
That is correct.
Okay.
What's funny is that the follow-up question to that is normally, do you like Dune? And my answer is no, but I adopted him from a friend who does.
Ah, gotcha. I usually try and get where the reference comes from first, and
Yeah,
then
yeah, yeah.
I'll ask if you actually like it, because some
I,
people.
I, yeah, that's got a very, very devoted fan base. Maybe not as
Oh,
big as some of the other ones, but the people who are into it are like,
and they're also really militant about it. Like they're very much like, ooh, like sometimes they're a little too much. My friends had a dog that they never named him, but he was a Chihuahua named Moose. And so it was like he was adorable, loved that dog so much, but like they were just like every time you looked at him you're just like this name doesn't fit you. Like he's like the sweetest little cuddle bug, like but he was just Moose. He was Moose, or
Moose.
Mooska is what they used to call him.
Muska.
um
Muska's pretty cute though.
yeah, it was cute. Like that once they added Mooska, I was like, all right,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
cute.
yeah.
But
I'm
like
far more on board with that.
but they also that was my nickname for my nephew. So like whenever they feel like Moose, and I'm like, I know you're talking about the dog, right?
At least I hope so. I don't think your nephew was apparated.
I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. That kid could get into anything. He's fun. uh yeah,
Kids are
but
pretty wild.
oh, seriously though, I have 6 nephews and nieces and
Wow.
nieflings, and so yes, I have a couple that are non-binary, and so
I
I
no, I
very
love it.
much like. So I was like, I don't know what to
Niefling's
call you
fantastic.
guys, and,
I need to propose
and
that to people now.
yes, and I was like, okay, that's kind of cute. Like, it makes them sound like they're coming out of like Lord of the Rings, and I like
I was about to
it.
say it's like a variation on a tiefling.
Hmm. Just a little bit, and I was like, okay, I'll use
I'm
that.
into it. I dig it. I love it.
But yeah, that was one scene I do think is in Titanic. I wish they would have had a little bit more. Is the Carpathia, because I think it does
Hmm.
like the ramifications of, and I know for like storytime purposes, it was just another thing that they didn't need, like to have someone like you said, it's a deleted scene. But I like when you're watching a film or a historical film, generally I like my facts to be mostly correct.
Oh sure.
And that's one of the things that it slightly drives me crazy about this movie. But the other one
Yeah.
was another one is the International Ice Patrol was founded in
Oh
1914 after
yeah.
this.
Right.
um which alerts the shipping vessels to alerts any vessels and shipping routes in Europe, Canada, USA, of icebergs, and it's actually run by the U.S. Coast Guard now. But yeah, those were just a
That I did
couple
not
of
know.
things. Yeah, those were a couple things that I've always found fascinating about it. And I remember as a kid, I was just like, you learn all these different stories of people. Like these people were real. Like,
Hmm.
Jack and Rose are fictional, but like the people around them
Right.
are real. Um,
Right.
like Jay Bruce's May, his
Hmm.
you know his downfall and fall from grace once he came back and ostracized. And one
Yeah.
thing, I was gonna say, the other thing that drives me a little bit crazy about the movie is the unsinkable Molly Brown story. Is they just don't tell it correctly, and I think
Yeah.
she's so
Yeah.
fascinating.
I
But
think so
not,
too.
and I'm like, oh, I love this movie. Here's what I don't like about it. Like now we can get into stuff I love. Like I just love this movie. Like it's
It is a good
one of the
movie.
greatest musical movie romances. Titanic musical would be fantastic. I'm not gonna lie.
There is a Titanic stage musical that I have not seen, and
I
I
was
know
gonna say, I
nothing
know
about, but I
there's
know it exists.
yeah, I was gonna say there's one now called Titanic, and it's like
Yeah, the
Celine
Celine Dion
Dion.
thingy.
Yeah, I'm like, I watched. Who are they on? Like Craig Fallon or something? I think I just mixed up
Huh.
people. Craig Fallon. I don't remember who they were on, but like, um, but I was watching it and I was like, Whoa, wow. I was gonna say whoever they got for Celine Dion is pitch perfect. Like like
Wow.
they sound just like her.
That's pretty impressive because finding anyone who's a dead ringer for a unique voice is very difficult.
Seriously though. Seriously. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine if someone was like, "Hey, go find we're gonna make an Ariana Grande musical. Go find one." To be like, "That's a little hard."
Yeah. Oh, they had a share one and they had like three shares from like different like periods of her life, and I'm like, you could find one to if you could find one, I was impressed. Three? Whew.
That's cool.
Yeah. Uh
That is
it is
very
pretty
cool.
cool. I was gonna say that one I haven't seen yet, but I did listen to the
Mm-mm.
soundtrack and it was a really good soundtrack.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I don't know anything about. I know nothing about the Titanic musical or Titanic. I don't have enough interest in either of them to kind of pursue them down, but if somebody happened to have a like if they released a recorded version that I could watch, or if like a friend had tickets and was like, I know you like Titanic, so I figured we could go to this thing together, I would obviously go, but
I was gonna say I
it's
usually
not.
use
Yeah,
YouTube.
there you go. I mean, I think way back yonder in the day, that's how I saw Wicked for the first time, is like some illegally uploaded recording of Wicked
Yep,
of the
and
original
that's
cast.
yes, I have one downloaded. Don't
Yeah.
tell, but it's
Oh.
that way. Just in case it gets when it got taken off, I was like, I'm gonna keep this. Like we're gonna. So I downloaded it off of YouTube to be able to keep it.
I mean, I
And
own a hard
so
copy of Titanic for that reason. It's like because when it's not on streaming anymore, I have it. It's fine.
yes, exactly. I mean, I think my parents still have our VHS tape version of Titanic. I don't think any of us own a VHS player, but we still have it. I was gonna say, and I can tell you exactly when tape 2 starts because that's right when
Hmm.
it's the slap
Yep.
when he
It
slaps her.
starts with he's standing in the doorway with like his hand in the door like
Yes.
this, like glaring at
Like
her, like he just flipped his coattail over his hip.
yes, he's just
It just
chastising her with his eyes. He's like whack. I'm like,
with his
oh,
Billy Zane facial acting.
oh god, I love Billy Zane in this. I
Me
just love Billy Zane in
too.
general.
Me too. I love him and like this is gonna sound stupid, but I love the fact that he is so good humored that he comes into the movie Zoolander and lets Ben Stiller scream, "Put a cork in it, Zane!" directly in his face, and then run away. It's like I like you.
He's just hysterical and he's just
Yeah.
great in everything. Like my I really like him. He did this movie with Nicole Kidman and Sam Neill called Dead Calm, which is
Oh, I've
also
never
on a
heard of
boat.
this.
Oh, it's really good. It's a small little thriller. He plays so Sam Neill and Nicole Kidman are a married couple whose child had sadly passed away in a
Mm.
tragic accident. And so they are just sailing like he used to be like and it's an Australian. They're Australian, I believe in it. Like so they're actual where they're actually from. And
Right.
they end up coming across like a sinking ship and he's on it and he ends up coming
Oh
aboard
wow.
and like everyone else on the boat was dead and he ends up leaving her husband there and like basically just like kidnapping her and so like the husband's trying to stay alive, she's trying to figure it out, and it's like a really good cat and mouse game. But it's like I remember watching that on TV when I was a kid, and then Demon Knight is my other Billy Zane. Like these three are my Billy Zane trifecta.
Nice.
Demon Knight from Tales from the Crypt.
Oh yeah. He's just so good in everything he does. He gives it his all.
Oh, he really does. He's so cool. He just seems cool. Like he seems like he'd be fun to hang out with. Like
Yeah.
he's just a cool dude.
Agree.
um do you so I was gonna ask
Mhm.
oh, where was my question?
Mm. Did Billy Zane steal it?
It might have been stolen.
Oh well.
Yeah,
The Phantom
it
got
must
it.
be a lie. It must have been a lie. I didn't even write him. If I didn't
Oh
write it, it
well.
must have been a lie.
Yeah, whatever.
I was gonna say, so when did you see? I know you. I listened to a couple episodes. So I know you
Uh-huh.
said you saw Titanic uh, early. Um,
I did.
so what uh, do you? I have a question for you. At the end,
Yeah.
do you think Rose is dead?
Yes.
Okay, good. So do I. Anyone who says
Yeah,
differently,
I
I'm like, no, I don't think so.
it would be it's like because if I entertain the idea that she is just sleeping, it's like that is way too poetic of a dream.
Hmm.
Like it is just so nicely wrapped up in a bow, so pretty. It's a literal dream come true.
Right,
To where it's like if that is simply a dream and then she just wakes up and it kind of undermines the impact, I think.
right. No, and I agree with
Is that
you. I
weird? Okay.
No, it doesn't. I think you're absolutely right. I think
Mhm.
a lot of I've had a couple friends and they're all like, "Oh, she's sleeping," and I'm like, "Her eyes are still moving." I'm like, "No, she's dying. She's not either dying or dead. Like maybe her eyes are still moving a little bit, but they're like it emphasizes the poetic nature of the story too, because like she's back to the spot where basically her life began, and I just love that this movie is
Right.
like very feminist in like the character of Rose and like allowing her to go back and have this big her like whole life, and then like she goes back to the spot where her life kind of began, and I
Mhm.
just love that. But I've always it's one of the questions I ask whenever I watch this with people. I'm like, do you think she's dead or is she not dead? And it's usually about 75% dead.
I
And
was
50,
going to say like I didn't it didn't even seem like a question to me the first time I saw it. Even though I was a kid, it was like, "Ah, she died." Like
yeah.
it didn't seem open-ended to me. It wasn't until I grew up that I realized it was open-ended for some people and it was like a surprise.
Yeah, and well, I was like I couldn't see that story ending any other way. Like it was
Yeah.
perfect. Like she's back to the spot like where basically her life began, like where he saved her, and then like she goes like it's just such a poetic bringing your whole story around.
Sorry, I was trying to eat a cookie, which is a good thing to do when you're in the middle of recording a thing.
Oh, you're good.
But
I was like, I have
I
to hurry up and
mhm.
eat dinner before this.
Oh my god, I did that too. But I had a friend who was coming to pick something up from me too, and they're running a little bit late, so it's kind of like kind of sitting there waiting for them to show up. But what I was gonna say is, I think especially like I think some other people discuss it too, and I feel similarly in that it's a little sad that her husband and like other and her children don't get a mention like outside of oh yeah they existed and here's my granddaughter as a plot device, but outside of that it's a little bit not depressing, but it's kind of like that's kind of sad that they don't seem to have made any impact
Right.
on her at all, other than to have fulfilled this wish that Jack had for her, which is a little weird. But I do
See.
like that she was able to go back to, as you say, the place where she decided to leave the life they decided for her and find the one she wanted.
Hmm. And honestly, I like to believe like if there is such a thing as an afterlife, and I'm still undecided.
Mm-hmm.
But I like to think that there's a part of you that goes to each one of your favorite like favorite moments. So like
Mm-hmm.
17-year-old Rose is back on the Titanic, but 30-year-old Rose is, watching her however many children with her husband and they're laughing in the living room kind of thing. Like you don't have to stick to just one moment or like there's different parts because you're different. I'm a different person than who I was yesterday. Everyone's different,
Sure.
like as they grow, and I like to think
Right.
that every single like all the different ones get like a happy moment, which is
That's a nice way to think of
incredibly.
it.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm an optimistic realist. Like I know things aren't probably gonna work out for the best, but I can still hope for it.
Oh, I like that because I'm a pessimistic realist.
Ah, gotcha. So you're like it's gonna not work out for the best, and it's not gonna work out for the best.
Yeah, basically, but it's nice to have optimists around because when things do go well, they can, be like, "See, I told you." I'm just like begrudging acceptance.
Yeah, I was like, only this time. this time.
Well, it's fun. I don't like being right though. Do you know what I mean? Because it usually
Yeah.
means that something's gone horribly fucking awry. It's like, no, I don't like being right. Being right means that I'm right. I don't like.
Right.
Nobody wants me to be right. That's not a good thing. I should be wrong all of the time. I should be wrong 100% of the time. I'm not. That sucks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's sadly that is just unfortunately life for, and it just stinks because I get where you're
Yeah.
coming from, and I wish, like, and that's why I'm an optimistic realist. Is like I
Mhm.
like to look on the bright side of things, but like, is it going to work out that way? Probably
Right.
not. Like,
Right.
like, but I can still hope for it, which I think is kind of nice considering, kind of like a movie like this where you're just like, well, I mean, chances are they both could have died, but I mean, like, they didn't. Be a bad
Whenever
movie.
whenever they're approaching the iceberg and it cuts close to Murdoch's face and he's going
Mhm.
turn. No matter how many times I've seen this movie, I'm like, but what if they made it this time?
Right.
But what if it doesn't hit this time though?
I do that all the time. Every time I'm like, if the Mandela effect is going to change anything, it's going to need to change it now. Like,
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
I'll like, and I do that with a lot of movies where I'm just like, okay, so my biggest one, and this will be super dumb, but like, I know what you did last
Mm.
summer, like Sarah Michelle Gellar,
Yeah.
like
Mhm.
that one. I'm always like, maybe this time she'll make it. She never
Aw.
does, but
Right. No,
but
I get
every
it.
time. Same with Titanic though. You're just like, well, I guess that movie wouldn't be. I mean, it probably wouldn't be as big of a hit as it was, but it still would have
Yeah,
been a beautiful love story.
it would have
But
been, but yeah, it loses a lot of its impact if like I think I've talked about it a few times on the show too, where it's I don't even think we'd talk about Titanic if it, like Olympic, had just had a normal career and then been scrapped in the war.
right. Well, and sad in this one, it's funny because this one is like there are so many other shipwrecks that like had big stories and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But like this is the one you always think of, and I think of,
Yeah.
and the movie I think is the one that like really solidified it
Agree.
because there are many more. Like there was one I was doing some research on like famous sunken ships or
Mhm.
famous shipwrecks, and there's one of them that I had never heard of called the Wilhelm Gustloff, and that was sunk in 1945, and it
Mhm.
is the deadliest it, it took the most amount of people, like 9,343 people were killed in it, like sunk by a
Oh my
Soviet
god.
submarine, and that's 8 times what what Titanic,
Yeah.
how many people died in Titanic, and I think that's just like that's one I've never heard of, and I know that like people don't like to dwell on them because I think
Sure.
it is people's lives and their deaths, and but I have always found it fascinating, like the ideas of like shipwrecks, like there's a inherent like adventure slash romanticism about them, but I think that mainly just my Titanic. Titanic does that to me.
No, I don't disagree, but I think also too, even a more recent example, I brought this up on my last episode with Carson, is that I was talking to her about the Seawall Ferry a little
Mhm.
bit. It's a much more recent shipwreck, and it was a much smaller shipwreck, but percentage wise, I did the math with her, and Titanic had a 68% death rate. The Seawall Ferry had a 60% death rate. That's still
Wow.
real bloody high. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I mean, it wasn't as many people. It was 300 to 1,500. So again, that's a fraction of the people, but then you break it down to its percentages to where it's like, okay, yeah, but there was only 500 people on that damn thing to begin with. That's a vast
Right.
majority. And same thing with the Titanic, where it's like when you break it down to its percentages, it was exceptionally deadly and it was horrifyingly tragic, but we
And
just
you're
don't really
absolutely
talk about
right.
it much
It's
anymore.
no, and well, and I mean, I feel like there's so many like some of these sometimes like I feel like ship disasters are kind of pushed aside a little bit. Like they're not as like because I know that like seafaring isn't as prevalent as it once was, I do feel like it every once in
Mhm.
a while when these happen, they're talked about for like 10 minutes on the on the news, and then it's like, oh well, that was sad.
Yeah, you're right. And also, I was talking to my mom this morning, 'cause and I think I brought it up too. It's like the news itself is just full of abundant tragedy after abundant tragedy. That it's almost hard to hang on to one, because the minute you try to like deal with one, another one is happening. The
Right.
example I brought up with my mother was that it's like, what, I don't know what shooting we're on this week. Like I have the last shooting I'm aware of, and this might make me sound like I'm being callous, but it's like I'm not. The last one I'm aware of was the shooting in Colorado, but I'm fully aware that there's probably been three more since then that I just don't. I'm just unaware of because I haven't been tuned into it.
No, but it's so hard to be tuned into it. I completely get it.
Yeah.
Like I can't watch the news anymore. Like, which I know is
Mm-mm.
incredibly, like, I'll read it, like, and I'll read my news. But like I can't watch it because I just don't need all of that negativity. Like like a page on my phone, I could just put my phone down, or
Yep.
like feel it and then gone. But like news,
Come back
it
to it later.
comes back, and yeah, you're just like, oh, it's going to be played again and again and again. So I just can't watch the
Yeah.
news anymore. It's very hard for me to do it.
It is hard to deal with it, especially because, like I said, it just comes at you constantly all the time, and the fact that, we are still dealing with the COVID pandemic and the variants, and we're also in the middle of flu season, so you're constantly hearing about those things. Sprinkle that in with the recent midterm election nonsense, and then you add in shootings, add in the
Right.
abductions, the murders, and it's like, what? Wow, I know I should be aware of these things, but I cannot balance that into my head.
Yeah. And after a while, it becomes too much, and you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
like I need a break, and you'll just turn off your TV and not look at it for a while. Like
Yep.
I have nothing but streaming, so like luckily
Same.
I don't really watch the news because I don't really have it very much anymore. But it's so hard
Hmm.
to watch, like
Yeah.
stuff like, it's just disaster after disaster. It feels like sometimes.
It reminds me of the complaint I have about a lot of TV show seasons recently, which is that there's so much going on that you have no time to let anything breathe properly. And therefore, you just kind of hop on to the next one because you never got a chance to unpack the last one. So it's like, well, I guess we're
Right.
moving on now.
Yeah, and you're not even wrong on that one, because, well, and it's weird because I feel like like it's so oversaturated, but it's also like
Hmm.
undersaturated when you're looking for like the best ones. Like because everything takes so long to A, produce, and B, once it's out, like then you want to do it all at once and then it's gone again. It's like
Hmm.
like how many years do you have to wait between seasons now? Like it's hard to do.
Stupid.
And yeah, and it's an oversaturated market, but it's also somehow it's just not enough either. Like, but it's also it's too much. It's a really fine line, because
It,
I see where you're coming from, because
yeah.
I can't focus on more than one, like more than a couple at a time. And like it feels
Hmm.
like a lot of times everyone's competing so fast for all of it now.
Well, it's not even that. What I mean is that you watch a season of a TV show, and very often the timing is what I consider to be off. If you want an emotional moment to make an impact, you need to have people have chance to feel it. If a character
Mm,
dies and you want people to feel sad about it, you can't just be like, and then we're going to the party. There has to be some sort of deal or ramification or scene explaining the impact. Otherwise, you're just on to the next thing. And I find that so often TV shows are doing that now, where they want to introduce this plot and this setup and this character and this thing and this arc and that thing, to where nothing ever has a chance to breathe because we're on to the next thing. You don't need
gotcha.
87 plots in one season of a show. Like, I bring up this example a lot in that I've seen the movie Raya and the Last Dragon. It's
Hmm.
a movie, and that movie has enough plot for a season of an animated show. So you never really get to get into anything, where it's like, if you'd given that proper impact and actually gone over and really drawn out going into each of those territories and figuring out their culture and their land, going through the process of finding the pieces of what she's looking for which I can't remember the name of right now, but actually exploring things, I think it would have been far
Mhm.
more interesting. But instead, it's like, and here is this land. We go in and we steal this thing and we are gone. It's like, well, it looked pretty cool back there.
Right.
Guess we don't get to see it. All right.
Well, and one thing is, I think a lot of people's attention spans are a lot shorter than what they used to be, and I think, like a lot of times you hear about things like like they call it like the TikTok generation of stuff, and it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, everything needs to be told in like 2 minutes or less, and I think that's it's so rough because you can't really get into a story, like you can't tell very much of anything in 2 minutes. Like, could you imagine if Titanic was told in 90 minutes? Like,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna
Yeah.
get nothing out of it. Like, you're not gonna feel anything. And so
I
I
still think
absolutely
that's
agree with you
true,
there.
though. Yeah,
You
but
don't
I
think
also
so?
think that's well, I mean, I think that's the approach that they're taking, but I think
Hmm.
that's giving a lot of discredit to the viewers, because I think that most people would rather have a plot that breathes a little bit than constantly rushing through things, because otherwise you don't get to bond with any moments or characters. It's just like, well, I guess that happened and now it's over. Like
Right.
I like animated shows, and a couple I just can think of the examples because they came out recently. Like season 4 of The Dragon Prince came out, and that show, for people who watch
Hmm.
it, we've been waiting for 2 to 3 years for that season to come out.
Right.
And when it came out, it wasn't bad, but it was just kind of like, look at all the things that we're going to cover in the next coming season. Oh my god, all the plots on these characters. Look at these things, and wow! Now it's over. It was like,
I got none of that.
okay. And the ending didn't even feel like an ending. It was one of those things where it's like, it just felt like someone got cut off in the middle of a conversation. It's like, and then we're going to the land. Whoosh. That's not
Oof.
exactly how it ended, but it was kind of like, the pacing all felt off, and it's not like they were all bad plots, but it's sort of like you needed to pick a few of those.
Right.
Maybe saved a few of those introductions for the next season. Because as of right now, you just rushed through this and that and this and that and this and that, and there's no chance to actually deal with it. And the last season of Ruby, which is another animated show, did it too, to where like,
Hmm.
but by the time you're at the last episode, you're like, oh, Penny just got straight murdered. All right, moving right along.
You're like, I was like, are we going to talk about that? Or
Nope, not at all.
Like,
We're also
it's
not going to
just
talk about the
okay.
fact that it was a mercy kill by one of her friends. We're not going to discuss that either. We're just gonna, all right, there's a void now. Cool. On
I
we
was gonna
go.
say, I yeah, and I completely get where you're coming from, because it's
Yeah.
kind of like Game of Thrones, like, and I think that one, Game of Thrones, was like the biggest show of like the last like 10 years. In like, I remember
Unquestionably.
it was like everyone was talking about it
Everywhere.
when it was on. It was all over the place, and
It
like,
was everywhere and everything all the time.
exactly, and it grew organically, and that's one of the
Mm-hmm.
important things is like, and I know this is because they had the books, but like the first like 5 seasons are so good because everything grows organically. Every character choice feels like a character choice, but it's all grown. Like, and
Right.
then at the end, it was very much like, here, look,
Not from what
spectacle.
I hear.
It's like, yeah, it's like, yeah, I don't
As
get me
a
into
as Irish
it.
comedian Dara O'Brien said, he goes, it suddenly got quite shit.
Yeah, and it's not even wrong. It's, I could go into that for we would have to start another podcast. But, but
I haven't
yeah,
seen Game of
it's,
Thrones, but I have heard everyone. My mom was a big fan, is a big fan, but even she says like, yeah, that last it was just
yeah, it was,
trash.
it's just, it's a man, like you said with the Dragon Parents, where it's just like, here's everything, we're gonna tie it up, everything all bow, everything's done. This is not a character choice that they would have made before, but they're gonna make it now. Ha ha ha. Like, and you're just, by the end of it, you're just like, oh, what a waste of time.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
I every time, like, and I think about it, and I just, like, I'm probably turning red because I get angry about it. But because, well, and it was like the show is just so good, and like, I
Mm-hmm.
hate the fact that they rushed to the end so that they could go and
Mm,
do other things, and like, didn't,
yeah.
like, that's a problem for me. Ugh. But yeah.
No, that is frustrating. There's
I was gonna
there's
say.
an art there's an art to timing and to pacing, and good storytelling really really relies on that. And I completely understand having so many ideas and you're like, oh my god, I want to tell all these stories because I'm excited and this is going to be a really cool plot point and I cannot wait till they meet this character and they're going to go see this place which is really neat and oh my god, I can't wait to share it with everybody. But
Hmm.
part of the art is finding out how to do that because otherwise you're tsunamiing people with so much info that they
Right.
literally just look like they got smashed afterwards. So like, okay, that was an experience. I gotta go sit down now. All right.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
you don't breathe. Doesn't breathe.
no, and you have to be able to breathe because, like you said,
Mm,
it doesn't make an impact if you don't. Like,
yeah.
there are so many, man, I just, like I said, I'm gonna go back to Game of Thrones on that one, but like that, you just you if you don't every time a character died, generally, like a major
Hmm.
character, like you get reactions, and it's from
Right.
people like in the show, like they had like it has real world ramifications for them, like in it,
Yeah.
and that's not something you really good in a lot of shows. Like sometimes you'll just be like, okay, well that it just whoop, swept under the rug.
Yeah.
Like, oh,
Yeah.
they're dead. New character.
Yeah. And then that's what I mean by like letting things breathe is that if things don't have an impact, it wouldn't make it just wouldn't work. And like you said, that's part of what makes Titanic work really well is that it's a long movie. It's a 3-hour movie,
Hmm.
but it doesn't try to tell too many stories. And I, by contrast, half saw the 1979 movie SOS Titanic, which is also it has two versions. It has the TV version, which is 90 minutes, and it has the full version, which is 3 hours.
Hmm.
And so, it's the same runtime as the Cameron film. It had 3 hours to tell its story, but it both introduced too many people and had too many awkward stares to where there was so many people and so many plot points going on, but then none of them really developed. So it all felt very hasty and the timing felt off. And so instead of characters organically getting to meet each other, there was just like 90 seconds of significant staring across the room. And
Right.
it's like, there's no development in that.
And
It,
you're absolutely right. It's the same thing as the miniseries. Did you ever see the '96 miniseries?
I I have not seen the one. That's the one with Catherine Zeta-Jones in it, right?
Yes. So, and it has, and that's exactly what happens. Is like, I mean, they tell like the best Alice, like the Allison story, like the family of the
Yeah, yeah,
Allisons,
yeah.
where, and so like that one's
It's the
cool to
only
see,
first
but
class
like,
child to die.
yeah, I was gonna say, and so it's cool that they show it, but you also have like
Hmm.
Catherine Zeta-Jones's character, you have Peter Gallagher,
Yep.
you are watching all these different people, and it feels like
Hmm.
it juggles too much at too little, and they're
Yeah.
too different. Like it doesn't always come together naturally. Like, and
Yeah.
I had seen it when I was a kid, and then I recently rewatched it like, oh god, 5 years ago. I think it was on
Hmm.
Tubi. Like, and I was like, yeah, I love Tubi, and I was like, man, like I remember loving this way more when I was a kid.
Ha. Fair.
I was gonna say,
I have had that moment with
have
things.
you have you seen A Night to Remember? The
No,
one
I
that's
haven't.
considered the I'll be
I
honest with you,
haven't. I
it's been
should.
so long for me. Like I couldn't tell you everything, but I know it's considered the most like
It is.
Titanic realistic, but
It
it's
is.
the one thing they don't have is the ship breaking in half, but that's just because they didn't know that at the time.
Yeah, there has that is part of it in that there has been a discovery of new info in some
Mhm.
cases, like because yeah, the wreck itself was discovered in 85, so that was that meant that Cameron's Titanic had that info, and like as you said, they didn't have it at the time, so
Yeah, I was
just
gonna
working
say
with a
I
different set of facts.
yes, exactly. And well, and I mean, they didn't. I was gonna say in one of your episodes, you were all like, they didn't really believe any of any of the women and children, where
Yeah.
it was like breaking, and I was like, like, of course we're not gonna believe the women on this one. This one sucks. But
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
yeah.
To be perfectly fair, not I mean not to be one of the people who's like, well, it doesn't matter. It's like it no, they needed to be the truth. But on the other hand, it's like 1,500 people died whether that thing was in one or two
Right.
pieces. So like, I know that part of the reason and the was because White Star Line was like Well, if it also broke in half, it's going to make the rest of our ships look flimsy.
Weak.
Yeah. I was like, I kind of get where you're coming from, but on the other hand, it's like most of your ships aren't going to have most of its nose under the water. Like, that's pretty extenuating circumstances there, my friends.
Right. And then you have such a, well, pardon my French, fat ass of a ship like that's going to
Mm-hmm.
be carrying it to break it right
I
down.
mean, exactly. It was designed not to sink. Therefore, when it started to, it had lots of problems.
Yeah, it did not do well with any of that.
No, it's like me with minor inconveniences.
Seriously though, don't like I I probably get it from my mom, but I'm slightly passive aggressive and I'm working on it. It's a character flaw. But like a minor
I don't
inconvenience
know
will
what
happen.
that's
I'll
like at
just be
all.
like, yeah, and like minor inconvenience, and I'm just like, no, like this. Why
Yep.
does the universe hate me so freaking much? Like every time.
It's I completely understand. It's like this is just unacceptable. Over something like I don't know, I couldn't get the milk cap off on time.
Oh, I literally once just like took the milk cap off and it flew behind my refrigerator, and I was like, what is the why? Like it's still back there. I don't even think I went and got it. Like I was just like I was too angry. Like so next time I clean out under
You live
there,
there now.
yeah, it's like you will stay there for. I'm pretty sure I literally took like aluminum foil, just covered it. Like
I've done that.
like I've made all like, and I think I had like 2 pudding packets in like my cabinet. I was like, we're gonna have pudding because we need to get rid of the milk now. So I made what I
Yeah,
could,
I've
and the
done that.
rest was like cereal the next day.
Yup. I think I've lost a milk cap before. I think in my case it went like behind something that I would never be able to reach, like behind the oven. I was like, you don't remove an
Right.
oven. That's gonna
No.
get discovered when the oven dies and gets replaced.
Yeah.
And it was like I think I just got some plastic wrap. Yeah, there we go.
Yep. And you're just
Plastic
like,
wrap
well,
and a rubber band.
that's gonna be the way you do it.
Like this is how we're dealing with this, and no one. I live alone, so no one gets to say anything about it. That's
Yes.
the good part.
Isn't it nice to live alone? I love it.
Yeah, it is like the downside when I'm moving to Austin in with my family because I lost my job a few months ago, but it's kind of like, oh my god, I'm gonna be living with people for the
Yeah.
first time in such a long time. I'm like, I don't think I remember how to do this, you guys.
I was gonna say, just remember my door is locked and it stays that way unless knock first.
Well, not only that, but it's just like I'm not used to people coming up on me. So if you come up on me, I might just be like, what?
Yeah. Oh, I did.
Like, don't
I was gonna
scare me
say,
like that.
I all of my friends are like or most of my friends are married, and so like
Mm-hmm.
whenever we were doing anything, we always go to their houses. So I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
whenever I come to my house, they come to my place. I'm like, what are you doing here? Why are you
Right.
here? Like, you need it. What are you doing? Like, I love it. Like, it's nice every once in a while, but like so sometimes I'm just like, why are we not somewhere
My place is
else?
just so small that even when I have one guest over, it's kind of like, this is too much.
Right.
Like, we're bumping into each other because my apartment's like 500 to 550 square feet. I fall over a dog and he's 40 pounds. It's just like, this is like a stateroom on a boat, man. I got nothing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, so all of like my apartment's pretty big, but the one thing that's
Hmm.
so small is the kitchen. It's like
Mm,
galley style, so it's like literally
sweet.
it's big enough for like my shoulder. If I like hold my arms out like slightly, I touch both sides of it.
Great.
So I'm just like, all right, well, we're gonna have to make this work.
Ugh, that is so annoying. I like to cook, but it's like one of those things where it's like you need counter space, man. A good kitchen needs counter space. My
Yes.
old apartment was pretty good for it, but this one is just like cooking is a nightmare in here. It's like what? Ugh, no space,
I
no
know
space at
those
all.
feels. I made mashed potatoes for our Friendsgiving, and I was like,
Nice.
we always run out of potatoes, so I'm buying a
Hmm.
ton, and then I bought too many because I bought 6 5-pound bags, and I made
Wow,
5 of them. Yeah, I overestimated, but
that's a
I ended up
hobbit-sized potato feast.
it was a huge amount. Like I ate them for like I brought them to work because I was
Oh my
like,
god.
please eat these, get them out. Like everyone ate. Like I made 2 giant trays like to bring with, and then I had another one that I
Hmm.
was just gonna bring to work,
Oh
and
my
they
god.
ate like maybe 3/4 of one tray, and I was like, oh no. Luckily,
Swimming in potatoes.
one of my employees had her birthday was like that week, so I was like, we're gonna have mashed potatoes. I'll go buy like a rotisserie chicken. Like, see, look, we got lunch.
Like, oh, you should have made a mashed potato like bar. Put out, all those toppings and stuff. Then like
Oh
make your
yes,
own mash bowl.
that would have been so much fun. Now they're
Next
gone,
time.
but I'm gonna think about that
Next
next
time.
time.
Yeah, if you next time you make a Shire size batch of mash.
I was gonna say, knowing my luck, I'll probably forget and do it again next year. I'll
Hopefully
just be
you'll
all like, "How
remember
many
the
did I buy
Pixton
last year?"
jar.
I'll be all like, "Oh, how many bags did I buy last year? 6? Okay, I think that should have been about right."
I
Not
have definitely
remember
done
my
that.
15.
I've definitely done that. I don't remember what it was with, but it's like I have definitely done a thing where I made too much of whatever it was, and then the next year is like, well, the recipe said blank, so we'll just go with that again. Not fully ass remembering that last time I made it, I was like, I should have used 20% of whatever it was. But it's like, guess we're making that mistake again. And I think next time I hand wrote it on the recipe, it was like, reduce by 75%. Big letters at the top. I think I might have added you moron in pen just to like yell at myself.
See, my biggest thing was I have a couple friends that just like can't stand condiments, and like last year
Understand.
I made 2 different kinds of potatoes. One was like,
Mm-hmm.
just salt, pepper, butter, and the other one was like
Right.
garlic parmesan, and like they were both
Ooh,
pretty big
yum.
hits. But she was like, "Oh, the salt and pepper ones were still a little bit too seasoned," and I was like, "Okay, no problem." So I made a special batch that was just like a little bit extra, and or like just a little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of butter, or with butter, and then the other one was a more seasoned, just tasteful.
I cannot with the fact that someone was like, "Excuse me." The salt and pepper that you put on my starch
Was a little bit too
was an
much.
unhappy amount for me. Sorry, I'm half
Yeah.
Indian. So that is a concept that whenever I hear a
Oh.
story that it's like, excuse me, your bland food wasn't bland enough. I'm like, Susan, do you experience joy in any capacity? I
uh,
don't understand.
I was gonna say she's awesome, but like, yeah, it's sometimes I'm
I'm
just
sorry,
like,
I'm making fun
she'll
of
make
this.
a dinner.
This is
No, you're
I
good.
don't
I
understand.
was gonna say she,
I'm
like,
too
I love
ethnic to
her, but when I go
understand.
to her dinner, like sometimes I'll just like grab the salt and pepper before I even grab a plate because I'll feel like I know I'm gonna need those,
I,
just a little
oh
bit.
my god.
I was
Susan, I
gonna
wish
say
you luck.
otherwise, yeah. I was gonna say she seems to be doing okay, but like I'm very much I'm going to season it until I taste everything.
Mm-mm.
Like everybody has to taste it. Like I don't like bland food. Like I love my
No,
mother, but my
I
mom's open a can of spaghetti sauce or a jar of spaghetti sauce,
mm-mm,
pour it on on like cooked noodles and serve kind of
mm-mm,
person. And I'm like, nope, nope,
mm-mm,
nope.
mm-mm.
So
No, I can't.
after that, when growing up, you're just like, no, no, thank you. I'll take no bland food.
Excuse me, could you please
Yeah.
de-season your unseasoned potato?
Yeah, she did. She was like they were a little. She was like they were a little too much. I was like, okay, next year I'll tone it down a little bit. So it was just salt, pepper, and butter. I did bring chives to that. I was
I
like, if
won't
anybody wants to
actually
add
put
them
the
to it.
salt in it. I'll just show the salt bottle to the potatoes and introduce each other.
Oh no,
That'll be enough,
I
right? I
I
can't.
couldn't in my in my heart of hearts, I would never allow that. Like there had to be some amount of seasoning in there, and I wasn't gonna add the pepper, but I did add a little bit.
I don't. I'm sorry. This is killing me. I I also have a mashed potato story, but this is from my childhood. I grew up next to a family, and my I have a younger brother, and they had 4 kids, and I fell perfectly in between the 2 boys age wise,
Mhm.
and my brother age wise fell right in between their 2 girls. So like as a lineup, the just 6 of us worked out pretty well, and we'd play together and everything. And I was over there once and was gonna make instant mashed potatoes, and I don't remember how we got on the discussion, but I was preparing it the proper way where you like whisk the butter into the milk so it doesn't clump, et cetera, et cetera. And the guys were like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "You do it this way so it doesn't clump." And they're like, "Clump?" It's like the lumpy parts. Like, "Oh, I normally like it when it gets all lumpy." And I was just staring at them out of like abject horror. It's like, "You got instant mashed potatoes wrong? How'd we do that?" So I make
Oof.
them, and I finally finish the literal instant mashed potatoes, and they were like absolutely blown away by how good it was because I simply did not curdle the milk first. It's like just like what bar
Yes.
did I? This bar is so low I tripped over it. What's happening?
Oh my gosh. I had my mom over for dinner once, and I was like, I'm gonna make. I made just instant mashed potatoes, and I was like, it was instant mashed potatoes, but I always add like when I'm doing my own, I'll add like
Mm-hmm.
Creole seasoning to them because I like a
Ooh,
little bit of the
yum.
kick, and then I usually do salt, pepper, garlic powder, a little
Mm-hmm.
bit onion powder, stuff like that. I doctor them, and
Sure.
I remember she took a bite of it, and she was just like, "Where did you buy these?" And I was like, Aldi, which
Right.
if you, I don't, and she's like, these come from Aldi, and I was like, well, those plus the spices, like, what are you talking about, Mom? And she's like, this is really, really good, and I was like, I know you can
I
make
know.
these too, like you have
Right.
the technology, like you just choose not to use it.
Well, it's like, what was the joke? I don't remember which comedian it was. Where it's like, we as the British, we robbed all the other countries for spices and then didn't use a single one. It's
Yes,
like, yeah,
I
that's what
heard
some of you people do, man.
that. It's so true though. I'm like, sometimes I'm just like, I just have to shake my head over the abject whiteness of my
Yeah. So
which
I mean,
was funny because I'm like the whitest dude. Like I'm like if you roll my pant legs up, like my legs glow in pools. Like I'm so white, but like I will season my food. Damn it!
uh-huh. Oh, man. It's just so confusing to me when some people like, could you just tone that down a little bit? It's like, Marjorie, this is a mayo sandwich.
Marjorie, I love that one.
I'm like, I'm coming up with names for people I don't actually know.
I was gonna say, I was gonna say, I love Susan, but Marjorie, I think I'm gonna use that for now. Like Marjorie,
Just
Marjorie, take
stop.
your mayo sandwich and go, please. Just done.
Like, there's people I encounter, I'm like, you would think a cucumber is too spicy, and I don't trust you because of that.
Yeah, I know, or like, oh, jeez. Some people are be all like, "Oh, there's too much pepper and stuff," and I'm like, "Too much pepper? Like pepper? Like you mean like the little one that they come like you grind it yourself kind of pepper? Like how is that too much? Like unless you're eating like pepper chicken, like I mean, where like how can there be too much? I just never get it.
I don't know. Like I'm sensitive to salt, so I reach a point where I'm like, there's too much salt.
Yes,
And
agreed.
I hit that threshold much quicker than most people do because I eat a typically low sodium diet, heart patient again. But it's like again, I'm also aware like that's a me thing. That's a me thing, and that's a me standard. So like, I'm fully aware that that makes me very different than other people because I'm like, you're supposed to have seasoning in your food. Otherwise, it's like, why?
Otherwise, it's
Otherwise,
boring. It's just boring. Like, and then people go to restaurants and are like, "Oh man, this food is so good," and I'm like, "I can make this at home. You can make this at home. You just have to
right? It's
be,
got butter in it.
you just have to put stuff in it. Like it doesn't just come done."
Right. It's little tricks like in restaurants when the recipe says add water to a soup, they probably put either veggie or chicken stock in there.
Hmm.
It's those little tiny things where it's like, once again, you can do this at home. You just need to
Yeah,
do your research.
I did this
This
in
isn't
one.
Ugh.
not to bring up my mom around, but like my mom was over one time and I made rice, and I usually buy like beef or chicken stock, and then I cook it
Right.
in it or in
Yeah,
broth
yeah.
sometimes, whatever I have. And
That's
so
basically risotto without the cheese.
yeah, exactly. So and my
Mhm.
mom ate like I don't even remember what I made. I think I made tacos. And she's
Mhm.
like, "Oh, wow, what did you do to this rice?" And I was like, "I cooked it in like beef stock, and I added salt, pepper,
Mhm.
and like Creole, because
Whatever.
apparently that's what I add to everything now." but but
It worked.
she's like, "This is so good," and I was like, "I keep telling you, mom, like you can cook good food. You just have to be
Super
brave enough to
easy.
do it."
Yup. It's that thing, it's like we don't live in Titanic era anymore where if you wanted
No.
to have spices, you had to work in a restaurant because they were so expensive that only like certain big houses and certain restaurants and fancy places could have them. It's like, no, 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 we can have cumin in our house.
Yes.
It's here. Cardamom is
Thankfully.
is it's in my
Thank
kitchen.
you. I
I
don't
have
have
it.
cardamom in mine, but I should. I don't use it
But
very
that's an
often.
example. Well, I mean, I don't either, but we don't it's not that it's like food is not inaccessible in the same way that it used to be. It's like
Right.
can we can have those things now. Chicken stock, we don't have to actually boil our own chicken for it. We can go to the grocery store.
Right. Uh, Thankfully, like I don't. Every once in a while, I'll buy a rotisserie chicken. I'm like, that's going to be a good chicken stock, but I don't want to do that every time.
I I've never done no. It seems like a hassle. It seems like a lot of work. And I'm lazy.
Yeah, I was gonna say the best part about it is an instant pot. If you have an instant pot, it's much better
I have a slow
because then you don't
cooker
have
and I
to.
don't have the space for both.
Ah, gotcha. I was gonna say instant pots do slow cook, so if your slow cooker ever breaks, you can do both with an instant
That'd
pot.
be a good upgrade.
Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Well, I don't want to keep you super long or anything, but I know that you had points on your beforehand. Was there anything else that you wanted to bring up or ask before
Oh,
the end of that
I
sentence?
had one other thing I wanted to bring up,
Yeah.
which was something I learned about when I was doing my research to come and talk to you a little bit. I didn't want to be,
Uh-huh.
I don't like to, but I learned that actually, Titanic actually had provided more lifeboat accommodations than were legally acquired,
Ain't that
like at
wild?
the time. Yeah, and that was something I was like, whoa, like you
It's
think it's
crazy.
crazy?
Yeah, like I remember when I learned that too, and it was just like, again, it's like it is bananas to harken back to a time when there wasn't 24/7 communication and when there wasn't a seat in a lifeboat for every ass on the ship.
Yeah,
Because at the time the concept was it's not supposed to actually save your life. It's just supposed to be a little fairy device. It's like, okay, noble concept, but
needs better
what if the
execution.
yeah, what but also what if that distance is longer than you think it is? Shouldn't you have Yeah, but it's like they didn't think of it that way, and they're like, well, we only need to have this many. It's like, no, no, no,
Yeah, I was
no.
gonna say. Well, and I one thing I did read was like the
Hmm.
regulations for how many like lifeboats they were supposed to have weren't changed since like 1864 before Titanic,
Hmm.
like which or 1894. I'm sorry, um, and which didn't the passenger ships weren't as big then, which were
Yeah,
13,000 was the biggest one back then, and then Titanic was
right.
46,000
Yeah,
tons. So like a huge big jump there.
like almost three and a half times as big. It would be like if we were using like I don't remember. But I saw an advertisement for like the newest. I don't remember. I think it was Carnival, the newest whatever Carnival ship, and it is like fucking massive. Is the only way I can describe it. It
Right.
is the biggest passenger capacity. It was like 7,000 people or some sickening amount of people. But
Hmm.
imagine if that ship were being held to cruise ship regulations from the 1960s.
Right.
It just wouldn't work.
Well, sometimes they are a little bit. Sometimes
Uh,
they need to upgrade some stuff.
Well, you're not wrong there. But specifically lifeboat capacity, it would be like, well, they only need enough for that many. It's like 7,000 people, you need to have room for 7,000 butts in a boat.
Right. Yes.
We know that now.
Yeah. It's always hindsight is 2020, isn't it?
Yeah. It's unfortunate that a lot of these things weren't things that were figured out, but like I was discussing with Carson too, it's, every policy ever written was written in somebody's blood.
Right.
It's just super sad that it has to come about that way because, again, 1,500 people died in the Titanic in order for us to upgrade our lifeboat capacities. You know, 300 people died on the Seawall Ferry in order for us to, uncover the corruption in South Korean ferry loading. It is so sad that in order to find out that we have failed, we have to sacrifice people. And in both of those cases I mentioned, many of them were children. And it's just like, that's not how we should be learning our lessons. And, I know that sounds a bit like preachy to the choir, where it's like, wow, we should stop killing people. But like,
No, but you're absolutely right. Like it kind of gives you to how many people have to die for us to learn something. And
exactly.
it's unfortunately it's more than what more than what most people I think would be willing to give, but we end up doing it anyway.
Yeah. At the end of the day, these are unfortunately the takeaways, because it's fun to talk about the movie and the ship, but at the end of the day, it was a horrible thing that happened, and the reason we still talk about it is because there's still lessons to learn.
Right.
Always a fun time.
Yeah, I was gonna say, movie's fun time for
Yeah.
most of it. Not the real
For
thing.
most. I saw a TikTok. I don't have TikTok, but every once in a while I like boot it up. And I think it was someone probably in our age bracket. It was like my sisters who are, 15 or 16, and her best friend watching Titanic for the first time, just watching them go through this bananas roller coaster of emotion. Because at first they're like, this is fun. They're like, well, he's being rude, and then the ship starts singing, and they are bawling like uncontrollably. And then the ending comes, and they're just like, ah!
I cry every time I watch this, and it's like I remember specifically the moment that got me when I was a kid, and it was when the lifeboat goes back after they've been in the water, and then they're shining the light around, and it's the mother holding the baby.
Yeah.
And that one, I bawled. Like, I was crying. I'm like 9 years old, and I am sobbing my eyes out just watching this movie. And I just remember just being so devastated. And so that's what I think. Like, that's one of the moments I'm like, oh, every time I watch Titanic, I'm like, I know I'm going to cry. Like, usually Titanic is usually an annual viewing for me and my friends.
Nice.
But we do Cuddle Puddle, which is we'll go to one of their houses, and then we'll all just usually it's my best friend and her wife's house, and then we'll go and we'll just lay on the bed. Like, they have a projector, they'll put it on the projector. We'll get snacks and then watch and cry.
That sounds good to me.
It is. It's one of my favorite traditions.
I need to find somebody to do that with.
It's worth it. Trust me.
Well, I'm gonna that challenge accepted. Awesome. Well, Shawn, thank you so much for coming on. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for coming on to talk to me about lots of things, and mostly seasonings.
Yes, I was going to say the seasonings are important. That's what we have to make sure. This is our biggest takeaway. Seasoning is important.
Season it well and let it breathe.
Yes. You can say that about a lot of things. Yeah.
Agreed.
Even TV.
Agree. Oh my God, agree.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Thank you for coming on. This was a blast. I want to thank Shawn again for coming on the show. If you guys want to get in touch with Shawn, which you totally should, you should listen to his amazing podcast, which he runs with his co-host Clayton. That is the Men Who Like Movies podcast. And you can find them on Instagram at Triple M Pod. So that's TRIPLEMMM Pod. You can also find them on Facebook on Men Who Like Movies, and Twitter at Triple M Pod, again, Triple MMM Pod. And you can find Shawn, his personal account at twitter.com/smurph013. That is SMURPH013 on Twitter. Thank you again, Shawn, so much for coming on. Thank you to everyone for listening, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!